good evening.
Welcome to Alaska divided by zero. It's been a hot minute, hasn't it?
Well, we've been gone for quite a while here on the India Escape Network. We've been out in Chicken, spending our summers out there doing a whole bunch of activities. And if Joe pulls up the video, we'll start off with talking about some of the things that we've been doing while we've been gone for the past couple of months. There are a few reasons we drop off from contact with the India Escape Network during the summer. We live in Alaska, where summers are short and we're forced to attempt a year's worth of work in a brief amount of time. There's a running joke. Alaska has two seasons, winter and construction. We spend our summers in the wilderness completely off the grid. Chicken is 404 miles away from our winter home in Anchorage. Located along the eastern border of Alaska and Canada, about midway up, Chicken is the last town before the northern border crossing and 160 miles away from Dawson City, Yukon. Chicken is the only town in the world named Chicken. In 2005, we staked our property. Our cabin is on the eastern ridge of the 4,967-foot tall Taylor Mountain. At 2,600 feet, we're the highest ridge in between Mount Fairplay, an extinct volcano 30 miles to the south, and Mount Warblow, 16 miles to the northwest. The electrical grid ends 70 miles south of us. There is no cell phone service. Our only link to the outside world is a satellite phone that we use for emergency purposes, if it works. Here we are alone without Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or email. Daniela and I are still building our summer home and lodge. However, what we're building is much more than just structures. We're building a place where artists may take advantage of the location to create in a remote wilderness environment. The 503c nonprofit corporation we are establishing is the 40 Mile STEAM Foundation. STEAM is for science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. This was a busy summer for large projects. The installation of signage and artwork took a backseat to more important endeavors, including planting over 250 irises. We installed concrete patios to our kitchen and our sauna. We moved in cabinets from Anchorage and started to install our counters in the kitchen. Routing and sanding, as well as standing and finishing the countertops, was an ongoing endeavor. The countertops all received 4 coats of tung oil. We still have water and electrical to install. That will occur next June. Outside and inside trim had to be installed on both the kitchen and the shower and the sauna. The biggest project this year was excavating 200 yards of decomposed granite to level out an area behind the cabin and the kitchen. The excavated material was used to fill in and expand the driveway, which is 3/4 of a mile long. Our final triumph was moving our storage sheds behind the cabins to open up our view. After October 15th, the road to Chicken is no longer maintained and it fills in with snow. This means it's time to regroup in Anchorage and plan for next summer's work. It's also time we can contribute to the India Escape Network. This is Cold Fusion. So, hello, Joe. Are you there?
I am here. And so, wait a minute. Who was driving that, moving the building? Was that either one of you?
That was our neighbor, Wayne Duke, that was driving a bigger tractor because that has about a 5,000-pound lift capacity. Our tractor only has about a 2,000-pound capacity, so he could just do it in one shot. So, yeah, he was helping us out on that day.
Nice.
Now, with 40 Mile Steam, when we invite you up here, I'm assuming you're going to be the mathematics type of guy?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so we can sit down around the fire and talk about differential equations and things like that.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm looking forward to it. It's all intellectual. It's all art. Yeah, it's what it comes down to.
I've got this app on my phone that if you take a picture of an equation, it'll give you the answer. So we're good.
That's cheating, Joe. That's cheating.
I'm okay with that.
That's how you would have gotten through college. All right, I'm going to step out. You have a good night, Joe, and
Thank you. You do the
Daniela,
same.
you're on your own.
All right. All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks for joining me tonight. My guest is another horror author, Shawn Burgess. The premise for tonight's show is that, I feel like when we look at the season that we're going into right now, it's a season of darkness. Traditionally, Samhain was the Celtic holiday celebrating the end of harvest and the beginning of the season of darkness. Samhain is halfway between the fall equinox and then the winter solstice. This traditionally was a period in which people sat around the fire and they told stories, typically stories that were scary. Now, and this was a tradition all the way up into the Victorian times. Now, we've kind of gone away from that with, Christmas being this, holiday of cheer and whatnot. But when you look at a lot of Scandinavian countries and Northern European countries, as you go towards the winter solstice, they have a lot of more traditionally scary traditions. So I've decided to bring back this culture of telling scary stories as we go into the season of darkness. And we're going to be interviewing a few horror authors as we go into the holiday season. So, Joe, if you could bring on my guest, Mr. Shawn Burgess. Tonight, we're going to talk about some scary stories. How's it going, Shawn?
Hey, doing great. How you doing, Daniela?
Oh, doing okay, thanks.
Awesome to see
Shawn.
you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. It's a pleasure. I've enjoyed reading your books. I'm a big fan. Could you do us a favor? I've read your books. It was the Tear Collector, which you've now renamed the Tears of Grief Hollow, and the Ghosts of Grief Hollow, and you've also got a prequel called Sour Roots. Could you tell us a little bit about your books?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, first of all, hey, I'm Shawn Burgess. I'm a dark fiction author. So I tend to write a lot of horror, mystery, suspense, kind of mixing in those elements. But the first book is Tears of Grief Hollow. So as Daniela mentioned, that was rebranded from the Tear Collector and re-released. It's a story that's a coming of age paranormal thriller. It's about a group of boys who start looking for their missing autistic classmate, and that's sort of what sets off the chain of events. And as they get further along in their investigation, they intertwine with a detective who's also looking into the missing girl's disappearance. And strange things start to happen in this town. There's a brutal murder, and then things start to really unravel from there. But I really like the book because I feel like coming of age resonates with sort of a wide audience. So whether that's someone that's older and has that nostalgia for their youth, or whether that's someone younger and can relate to those characters and maybe see something of themselves in one of those characters or one of the friends that they grew up with.
Well, what I really liked when I read I keep calling it the Tear Collector because it was the Tear Collector then. Now it's been renamed the Tears of Grief Hollow. Was that the bond between the boys was definitely had a vibe a lot like Stephen King's It, where of course, much like It, none of the adults in the town except for Detective Holt, the other main the main protagonist in the story, none of the adults really believe them. They know they're not going to be believed, that there's this paranormal activity that's actually causing the disappearances. So they know that they're on their own.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the fun things I think to play with, the fact that kids are so open-minded and are apt to believe things, whereas adults won't. Now, this isn't like a Barney Fife type of detective. Like he is, right, pretty intelligent, pretty good at his job. But I think that, really opens the door to kind of bring the reader in to sort of like believing that these events could possibly be transpiring. I try to write really realistic and relatable characters. I tend to have quite a bit of dialogue, and I feel like that helps pull people into an actual story.
Well, and that's what I also
And
did
so
like
some
about the
crazier things that
character.
I throw your way.
No, that's what I did like about the story is that, Detective Holt is not, he's not just like this superhero detective. He has, family problems at home. He and his wife are going through marital problems. He's, but he's also not like he's a realistic person. He's not a caricature. So I felt that was really well written. And then the same thing with the boys. Each of the boys has their own thing. We'll kind of get to that a little bit later in the show. We're kind of jumping ahead on the questions. But where did you come up with the idea?
So actually, funny thing, my kid asked me to write him a book. So I started with 3 characters and lines of dialogue, which were T, Brooks, and Robbie, who are 3 of the main boy characters. And from there, the characters sort of fell into place. I'm definitely more of a pantser, typically. So I have an idea of where I want to start and then go from there. And a line of dialogue or some small action in it may make me change course, just depending on if it makes more sense for the story and it's more engaging for the reader. Ultimately, I typically know about halfway through where I want to go. And that's, I think, on this story, I did as well, kind of knew how I wanted to end it. But I don't really set out with like a firm outline or a plan. I look at novels sort of like a puzzle and just puzzling all the pieces together. So I typically go back and reread a chapter before I start to a new writing session, and then take off from there, just so I'm re-immersed in the world.
Gotcha. See, the funny thing is, I joke, I'll write an outline, and then I'll start writing, and then I go back to my outline and go, oh wow, how do we end up here?
Now, how do I make the dots connect?
Well, I don't actually end up making it connect. I just kind of go back and go, oh, that was my plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I think was interesting, and not to give any spoilers, it's kind of a great, when I look at the Tear Collector versus Ghosts of Grief Hollow, it's almost like here's the climax of here's the boys building their bond, and here's the boys' bond almost falling apart. The characters, what they're going through in the second book is tearing at them. Yeah. And so I like the way you did that.
And I think book one is a lot more character building. Obviously, it's fast paced. There's a lot of things that happen. I like to have a lot of characters in my novel. I might kill a few.
You might, yeah. We'll get to that too.
Gotta have a few in there, but I think you really get a firm grasp for who all the boys are, and they all have sort of their own individual personalities and quirks. Even the villains. And really, in book one, there's really like 2 antagonists. I would say the first one is, I'm not going to give too much. The first one is an entity. We'll just say that. And then the second one, I would say, is like the bullies that are harassing this group of kids. So you've got like those 2 antagonists. So it's pretty much anywhere that they turn, they're running into trouble. And so the suspense sort of builds towards the end.
So how'd you come up with the idea for Lady Zuba, the antagonist?
So I felt like if I wrote book 2, that was just a straight continuation of book 1, it sort of places that I had already gone. So I already knew that I wanted some sort of new big threat, and I just started writing her. Usually, like when I'm writing these characters, the dialogue kind of takes me to who they are, and I sort of knew I wanted her to have like this, I'll say, just like witch type background, and sort of went full-fledged in that direction. And obviously she has a much deeper history than that, but I won't give away too much about who she is.
Right, because and as we talked about a little bit in the pre-show, that it may not be over.
Correct. Yeah. So I did leave the door open. I am contemplating writing another full-length novel continuation on this series, but with Sour Roots, the prequel, which actually takes place in 1932 at the height of the Great Depression, I'm planning on writing 3 more novellas kind of in that period to expand on that as well. But it's been a fun series to play with, and I really like the world of Harper Pass. It's like this claustrophobic town where you can't really get away from the troubles that are there, so you sort of have to confront them, and I feel like you kind of get to the essence of who each of these characters are pretty quickly that way.
Well, so speaking of Harper Pass, so Harper Pass is obviously fictitious. It's a fictitious little town, Appalachian town, and the settings, a setting builds like the backbone of a horror story. So like you get a lot of like whether some places just have certain connotations just from their name. So like like New Orleans, someone says New Orleans, I mean, I don't know about you because Van Rice, now I think of vampires and and creepy tombs and whatnot. Your stories are set in Appalachia, which hey, I'm originally from the West Coast before I moved to Alaska. So Appalachia brings to mind, it's like coal mines, kind of economically depressed, mountains. So it's like, what made you pick to set your stories here?
I think it's like the perfect. I love small town horror. I just think it's like fun because you have this isolated town. So, I mean, there's only so much help that's out there for you. So once things start going the wrong way, like you have to deal with it. Appalachia, like I grew up all over the Southeast. I spent a lot of time out in the woods as kids, as I'm sure a lot of other people did. While I didn't live in Appalachia, I lived in like Birmingham. I lived outside of Nashville, outside of Atlanta. Back in the days when I grew up, not to date myself that much, but there was a lot of undeveloped area and like old relics from just another area that you would run across out in the woods, like Civil War era structures still standing, and it was just kind of bizarre and like walking back in time. So my wife grew up in part of her childhood in Middlesboro, Kentucky, which is kind of in the heart of Appalachia, where I envision Harper Pass to sort of be. Now, I've never been to Middlesboro, but I've heard enough stories from her and her family about the town to sort of fashion this in my mind, this fictional place in Appalachia. And I think I have a pretty firm grasp for the dialect too. So I think in that regard, it works.
So yeah, which kind of answers my question. So it's Harper's Pass is based on kind of like a mesh of places you've been and places that your wife has been. So it's kind of I guess you could say a collage.
Yep. Yeah.
Where's a place like you would like to write about that you haven't written about yet?
So I've always grown, or for the past 20 plus years, I've been in Jacksonville, and I'm pretty close to the water, and we have a pretty big shrimping industry here. So I always wanted to write a story, sort of like a ghost story surrounding like a fishing village. So I have some ideas for that. I think that's a project for, a few years from now, but I think it would be really cool since I live here to, I would probably fictionalize the town somewhat. There might be some locations that are similar, but I probably would make it more remote than it actually is.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what is the creepiest place that you've visited in real life?
So honestly, I've done some ghost tours and stuff like that. I don't get creeped out easy. I love like the Tower of London and all that stuff, but I didn't experience it in like the dead of night. So, I just don't have any too crazy places. What about you? I have a feeling you got some good ones.
The creepiest place I've ever actually visited / lived in was the house I grew up in.
Yeah. There's some long stories behind that. I think we talked a little bit about some of them.
Yeah, the house I grew up in was the funniest thing is I experienced a lot of strange things in that house when I was a kid, and I never
Mhm.
mentioned anything about it until I left home and joined the Navy, and I came back and I was visiting my mother,
Mhm.
and somehow we got to talking about it one night, and she told me something that she experienced, and it was identical to what I had experienced as a kid. And
Yeah,
so
that's great.
then we started talking more about it, and my brother came home, and he experienced the same thing. It all had to do with things that we had seen outside the house at night, outside the windows.
Yeah, that'll get the hair standing on the back of your neck.
Yeah, and so we were all just like, oh my gosh. Now the funniest thing is like just last year my parents moved to Florida. They moved from California
Mhm.
to Florida. My mom has lived in that house now. She had lived there for over 60 years. And they moved to Ocala, Florida. Well, the first they were living in Tampa, and then they moved to Ocala, Florida. And so I asked her, it's like, well, when you sold the house, did you disclose that the house was haunted as bleep? And she's just like, well, they actually didn't care or really want to know. And I'm like,
Yeah.
seriously? Like, oh my God, those poor people. But
Yeah,
yeah,
well, you wonder like I always wonder, are some people just more receptive to
I don't
experiencing
know.
that? Because I don't. It just seems like I've been around for a long time, and certainly I try to put myself in harm's way of of things, and I've never. But it just
Well,
it's.
the story I wrote, the Darkland, was
Mhm.
based on Ray's experience out in the Alaska bush, out of out of
Yeah.
Basilness.
Well, I
Uh,
would love to know what parts of.
well,
what,
actually,
what,
so there Basilness is it's a place on the Nebezna side of Wrangell St. Elias. I actually
Mhm.
wrote a blog post about this, but it's he was out there when he and his brother used to homestead in Slana. He would go
Mhm.
hiking, and so he went into the north side of Wrangell St. Elias to Basilness, which is called Roasted Salmon Place in English. And he was like at the visitor center signing in, and the guy at the visitor center is like, "You don't want to go out there." And he
That's
thought the guy
ominous.
was he thought the guy was just messing with him, and he's
No.
like, "It's a beautiful summer day," and he's just like, "No,
Yeah.
it's cool. I've been out in the bush hiking by myself a lot," and the guy's like, "No, really, you don't want to go out there." And Ray's just like, "Yeah, okay." And he and his brother were really well known in the area, so it
Mhm.
wasn't like he was like, and he signed in. He went walking, and the trailhead's only about a mile and a half. So he gets out there, and so Roasted Salmon Place is an old fishing camp. So
Mhm.
he's out there, and he said he was looking around at the structures, and he just got this feeling like, don't look back, just run now.
Oh, that's
And
weird.
he just took off running, didn't look back. He said everything in him said, do not look
Mhm.
back or you're totally hosed. So he ran all the way back to the trailhead, and when you look at the history of that area, there's a bunch of stories by elder Katie John. She passed away a few years ago, but she's got one. It's called When the Tailed Ones Were Seen, and it's
Mm.
set at Basilness. And it's a description of these creatures with tails that would cut off people's heads and play soccer with them. And
Lovely fun.
yeah. So then, of course, Ray and I went camping out there to research
Yeah.
these stories. But yeah, so and I also tell everybody, if you're gonna, and then Joe's shaking his head. But I always tell people, if you ever want to go ghost hunting, never go with me and Ray. You will not see anything. We've
Yeah. Same.
we went to here in Alaska, there's this place, it's the Gakona Lodge, and it's supposedly one of the most haunted lodges in Alaska. We stayed in the lodge. We were like the only people there.
Ghosts got to take a vacation too.
Yeah, we stayed in the quote unquote haunted room,
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
No.
Nothing.
Yeah, no. Now I feel that if Ray and Daniela ever invite me on a camping trip or to a lodge, it's going to be a huge setup. And yet, no.
Probably. Yeah. Anyway. So that's another side
I
story.
feel like for people like me, it's really great marketing to say it's haunted, even if it's not. So you got to sift through the ones that.
Well, this one
really
was
have legitimate sightings.
the Gakona Lodge. I guess it's like it's supposedly haunted by the Gakona Lodge is one of the oldest lodges along the Alcan.
Mhm.
And it's supposedly haunted by one of the former proprietors who really likes to smoke cigars, and supposedly you'll smell cigar smoke in the room, and you'll feel him like touch you or something in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that's true.
We didn't hear or see anything. And then we went to the Palace Grand Theater in Dawson City, which is another one of the most haunted places in Dawson.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposedly haunted by Arizona Charlie, who built it, and by Klondike Kate. No, we didn't see anything, but talking to the people who run the tours, they say almost everybody who's run the tours has felt or seen something when they've been there in the evenings or there alone. So
yeah, well, I would love to check that out one day.
Yeah, Dawson is a really, really neat city. A lot of really unique history there.
Alaska's on my bucket list for sure. I know it's a big place. There's lots of places to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of places to go. It's a really it's a lot of I tell people if they're planning a trip to Alaska, one, you got to come up for a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to plan like which parts of Alaska you want to see, because I think the biggest mistake people make is trying to do it all.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
They try and do it all on one trip, and things are so spread so far apart that you just can't do it all. So you just focus on like the main one or two things you want to do, and then save the rest for another trip.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to you. This is
we took a little detour, but that was an enjoyable one.
We took a detour, but so one of my questions was going to be about so your characters, like the development of your villains and heroes. So like in the Tear Collector, Melissa was like the villain, and she was just this super creepy villain. But then what I think I really enjoyed is in the second book, it becomes a little more convoluted. So what were you thinking there?
Well, yeah, like in the first book, like she was very, very wicked, and she has her motivations, and they're like deep held motivations. But by the second book, I think I wanted to show like another side of her that, would give the reader a little bit of empathy for her situation. And I feel like that's the way life is sometimes. Like, not always. Like sometimes people are villains just to be villainous. But
well, I think even in the first book, you can understand her motivation as a reader. I mean, no, if the town kind of screwed her over. It's like, but you're also like, man, does that mean she's got to take it out on everybody like forever? But she's a little extreme here. But you can understand her motivation. But by the second book, you're like, whoa, she's okay, I get it.
She's cursed as well as like the families from the town. Well, careful how much I say.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, she is sort of a victim as well, while she's also a villain.
Right. So when you're writing characters and stories, do you sometimes like villains that are just villains for the sake of being villains?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I like characters with a really good backstory, and to where you could sort of understand your motivations, even if you wouldn't do the same things. But I think it's also fun just to have an agent of chaos sometimes that is just evil for the sake of being evil, and there may be some ambiguity, and you may not get a whole backstory on why they are the way they are.
Who's your favorite villain in horror, or even just in fiction in general?
I think, and like if I bring in horror movies into it, I'd say like Candyman. I love his I love his backstory and just the way that whole thing goes down.
Yeah, that was definitely he's definitely one of the best written villains, I think.
Absolutely.
And just truly creepy, and like I love the be my victim, and you're just like, oh man, like this is like modern Dracula or something, but just horrific. It's like, whoa, but yeah, I can agree with you there. I think for me it's like I mentioned, Stephen King's It is kind of like
I love Pennywise.
Yeah, it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was gonna say you sort of like made the comparison, or not really comparison, but like just the similarities between it and this book. And like it was a huge influence for me. I mean, that was like the first horror novel that I read. I mean, I read lots of horror short stories before that. So I feel like a lot of that sort of like bleeds onto the page with the dynamic of the kids and things like that. I love that book. It's one of my favorites, just from starting there.
So yeah, when I was mentioning it before, I was going to say, so was that like the first horror book that ever got you into horror, or was there something prior to that?
So I always read a lot of like horror short stories, and I was writing like horror short stories in like elementary school. My parents worked for the JCs, and one of their biggest fundraisers was like these big haunted houses that they put on like every year.
Oh, cool.
Since they both worked in it, I had to like be sort of in their childcare at the thing. So I saw a lot of that stuff, and my dad was super into Halloween. Now I'm super into Halloween. Guess that apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But
that's all.
So I think I just always had like an inclination towards horror from a pretty young age.
Yeah, that's cool. Where I grew up down in California. So I grew up in Victorville, California, and The Hills Have Eyes, the 1977 version, was shot there.
Ooh, creepy.
And so Michael Berryman, who starred in that movie as Bluto, lives in Apple Valley, which is the next town over. And so when I was 7, he came to our school to talk. And
cool.
He is like the nicest guy you'd ever meet. I mean, that just like made a huge impression on me, because it's just like, he plays this super creepy character in the movie, but in real life, he is just like this gentle giant. And I never forgot that when I was a kid. Here's this, of course. So then I come home from school and I'm like, Mom, can I watch this movie? And my mom is like, no.
Yeah.
Which of course means I'm going to find a way to watch it and give myself nightmares forever. But
yeah, I watched a ton of horror movies when I was a kid too. So whatever I could sneak in late night, creature features, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and out there in the desert was just the setting for a lot of old horror and sci-fi. And The Hills Have Eyes, and It Came from Outer Space. The Army of Darkness, part of the Army of Darkness was filmed out there. And
That's awesome.
so it was just it's kind of cool to watch movies. And actually, poor Ray, he has to listen to me all the time. It's like, oh look, that was shot, and Ray's just like, would you please just shut up and let me watch the movie? That's
funny. I have like a big horror collection on like DVD, and I'm like, it's so obsolete now, but some of that stuff you can't like stream, so it's nice to have.
It's hard to it's hard to find some of the stuff, you can't stream it. So I have a DVD collection, and it's just like, part of me is like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen when like they don't make DVD players anymore? I still have a VCR. I still have a working VCR. So.
Do you? Wow.
Yeah. But back to more questions. So when we're looking at Lady Zuva as well, are we potentially going to find out more of her backstory in some of these novellas?
So one of them potentially, but I really want to save her for sort of the full length. Because
Okay.
I think you would just be a lot more fun to explore, because you only get like tastes of her. I mean,
Right. Yes.
you get some impactful scenes, but I would really like to put her on the page more.
Yeah, she was a very intriguing character, and like I said, it's one that by the end of the Ghosts of Grief Hollow, she had made a lot of impactful moments, and you recognize her as being like kind of the start of things. But the
Mhm.
question is, it's like, okay, well, how is she going to play into this as the story moves forward? And so yeah, it's obvious that there's more to come, but the question is, I guess this is just my take. I got the impression, kind of like Melissa, her story is more convoluted than meets the eye.
Yeah, and Samantha, yeah, but
Samantha, I'm sorry.
no worries, no worries. Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously got to be more to Lady Zuva. Like you get some background, you get bits and pieces of her history and stuff. But I would really like to sort of fill out that character and sort of give the reader a lot more.
Right on. Awesome. So now here's something, one of my notes that I talked about betrayal. So we've got some betrayal going on in the second book. Like the first book, it's like, we're brothers from another mother, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
The second book, there's a lot more betrayal. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like the first book, there's some big themes going on. Redemption is a big one with one of the characters, and yeah, the friendship and the kinship. In the second book, I think you get to see another part of the characters where things don't always go as planned, and while they have this tight knit group, sometimes blood is thicker than water, and people have different motivations. I'm trying not to give too much away, so I'm talking.
Right. I don't want to give spoilers either.
While there's this really strong bond between the boys, there's also some other motivating factors to why some people are making the decisions they're making, which ultimately is a betrayal of the group and one character in particular, especially. I think sometimes people just get put in an impossible circumstance. I don't necessarily, in my eyes, I don't necessarily think that makes that person that betrayed the other one in this particular circumstance a bad person when they thought they might be able to solve both problems.
Right. They're
without terrible consequences.
Right. They think they're hoping they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think, as people, we've probably all been put in some of those dilemmas where you sort of do have to make a decision. And I think it's kind of fun to sort of put the character in that same situation and see what path they choose and what are the unfortunately grave consequences of that choice.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into themes. We started talking a little bit about themes, so let's dive a little deeper. So, the theme of man versus evil is obviously really strong in both books. You've got the boys and you've got the evil characters. But you often, I've noticed, you're incorporating like some of the social class struggles. You're incorporating some of the boys with the decisions that they have to face with themselves, with their families. So there's a little bit of a man versus self dilemma in there. Where do you draw on those themes?
So I mean, the way I generally think about it is, if you want like well-rounded characters on the page, I mean, to some extent, they do need to reflect the real world. And so you're going to have sort of a mix of experiences, backgrounds, different things that they face, adversity that they face that maybe their their friends do not face. So I think in order for readers to sort of invest in the characters and sort of have that believability, you do need sort of a wide mix that brings in real world issues that people face every day, and maybe will be able to relate to, or at least understand.
I think a lot of people don't, like I've seen some stuff written about young adults, and they don't think that kids think about those things, but they really do. I mean, kids are cognizant of, where they stand socially, that, hey, my friends are from a better background than I do, have more money. I really liked when the character is reflecting about how he's poor, his mom's working multiple jobs, and I'm probably going to be stuck here in this town. And my friends are going to get out of here, and I'm, he's and he's despairing, and it's eating at him. And I was like, wow, that was a really well written part of the story. I don't want to give away which character, because I want, when people read it, I want them to really get invested in that part. But I felt that was a really well written part of the story, because you can really feel his despair and his despair over his father.
Yeah, I think it's such a pivotal age, the age that these characters are at. It's really when I think you have sort of the most self-awareness. It's kind of an awkward age. It's kind of an age of you recognize your differences, from everyone else, and become a lot more self-aware. And I think it's sort of the perfect age for them to be confronted with that, and really have to kind of face their demons.
So one of the things that I mentioned we were going to talk about in the pre-show, trigger warnings. So I really when I was going through reading, especially the second one. The first one was wow, the second one I was like, oh, Nelly. Shawn hits all the trigger warnings, but you nailed them. But I feel like here lately, I wrote a blog post about it, which I definitely got some flack, because I feel like horror is the one genre which you really don't need a trigger warning, because you go into it expecting to be triggered. You're kind of no holds barred. But I kind of like your take on it. What do you think of the trend towards putting a trigger warning on everything?
So I think the trigger warnings is tough, because there are so many different things that could. I wish that there was sort of a universally accepted sort of rating system. I think that would probably be fine. To say maybe this isn't appropriate for this age group, and to some extent we do that, but it's just there are so many different triggers. I don't know where you start and stop listing.
Right. Yeah, and some people have said, well, a well-written blurb should be your warning. For me, I say, if you're writing romance, or you're writing, chick lit, or you're writing just plain literature, yeah, sure. If you're writing about horrific things like rape or suicide, yeah, please, put those kind of warnings in it. But horror, you go into horror expecting the worst. This is where you're going in, because in my mind, especially, you go in because you want the visceral. Horror hits at the visceral of human nature. We're going in expecting to get our guts ripped out, literally and figuratively. So if I have to put a trigger warning on it, what's the point? But that's just me. No. I mean, people can disagree with me on that. In fact, when I wrote that blog post, I got some nasty grams, which I'm okay with. People are allowed to disagree. But what is one area is kind of taboo? What won't you write about?
So I tend to write where the story takes me, but I probably would never write anything explicit about child abuse. Okay, that's probably a bridge too far for me.
I think you kind of you gloss it over, but yeah, I could see that.
I don't think, like, for me personally, and this is my boundaries, everybody's got different boundaries, but I wouldn't have a problem. Like, if it's a part of a character's makeup, I wouldn't have a problem sort of alluding to that.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I'm a really descriptive writer. So a lot of the stuff that I write is pretty descriptive. So I would never write I would never write a scene that way. But I think, the descriptive nature of what I write sort of like works really well for horror because it's really like visceral and you sort of get to see it and it's in your face. But
No, not at all. The centipede.
I don't have a ton of boundaries. I mean, I want my characters to be realistic, and like if that's who I feel the character is, like I'm gonna push probably some boundaries that people aren't comfortable with.
Oh yeah. No, I mean I enjoyed it. I was like, Shawn, oh wow, trigger warning. Oh, he's got them all. But yeah, for anyone watching, yeah, if you've got a trigger, Shawn hits it. You're good. But no, like I said, yeah, you are very descriptive. Like for people listening, if you have a fear of large bugs, Shawn's writing may not be for you, but everyone else.
I like my creatures, but I don't like them to be the only focal point of the story. But I do like monsters and creatures.
Yeah, I was really impressed. Like the creature, the one, I'm not going to say which one in the second book, but the scene in the jail with the professor. Oh, holy. I was sitting there going, oh, this is not real.
Yeah.
Where did you
that one? This is what I see in my head.
Oh, okay.
I don't. That probably makes me weird, but like that's what I see. So I kind of rate what I see to some extent. I mean, obviously using your imagination or whatever, but that's right. I write very visually. I mean, I think most of my stuff sort of like moves, like you could almost see it like as a movie in your head.
Right. No, but that was definitely that scene, and then the scene when with the deputy in the woods and all the roots. Yeah, when we were out in Hawaii, like chopping at all those vines and roots. I was just going, I should not have read Shawn's book right before doing this.
Move away from the roots.
It was weird because there was all these trees with these roots that were like this, like little fingers everywhere. And I'm going, oh boy. And then the Asian, there was all this Asian ginger, and the Asian ginger just runs along the ground and there's vines everywhere. And I'm just like, great, I'm going to die. I'm going to get sucked underground and these roots are just going to like go up in my nose and strangle me. Great, Shawn. Thank you.
You're welcome. I do, this is weird, but I sort of take pride when one of my friends, like usually it'd be my friends who read it that tell me this, that, oh my God, you gave me nightmares. Like
I didn't have nightmares, but that's just what I was saying. It's more like daymares. Yeah. It's like, at least I've got a machete, paralopers. Yeah. I'm gonna die. But kind of along those lines, we were talking about trigger warnings. Like, so, a lot of times we'll talk about like the rules of writing. Some people are like, oh, there's certain things you just can't write about, or people are gonna hate you. Like they'll never forgive you for doing things like killing favorite characters or animals or babies. It's a little more flexibility in the horror genre, but I'm not going to say which ones you broke in this book. All of them. But are there certain rules that you're what is your favorite boundary to push?
Honestly, I'll take it wherever the story goes. And like, I personally have a taste for like when the horror comes, it's pretty visceral. So I have no fear. Like, I don't think I want to write a whole book that is just only that, but I have no fear about like sort of pushing it to the limit when it comes to like character's unfortunate death and how that is described. and to make that almost maybe make you very uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, it was the first book, and I mentioned the centipede scene
Mhm.
with the death of the character in that scene was definitely like you can feel their fear and just, oh no. Um, I think in Ghosts of Grief Hollow, the scene that really gets you, and I don't want to say too much, is the scene with the detective
Mhm.
and his wife. So I won't give away too much there, but that one's a little bit more because the emotional, you know what they're going
Mhm.
through. And that one is like, oh no. But I also like how you left that one is felt a little open-ended.
Mhm.
So I'll be interested to see where you go with that. In potentially, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm definitely not done with the series, so I've been having a lot of fun with this world.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think you have to, like you're saying, like you're sort of like emotionally invested in those characters. And I think that's the only way that horror really works, like to really get you and unsettle you, is like if you really care.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
And
so not all characters you're going to care about the same, but it's the ones that hit you that maybe stick.
well, and I think that's what's really compelling about both stories, that I've read so far. Tears of Grief Hollow, Ghosts of Grief Hollow, is that the characters are very compelling. They're you get emotionally invested in them, and then like Game of Thrones, you just rip our hearts out and stomp on them, and we love you for it. So
Some people.
some people, I love you for it. It's great. So kind of going back, we had already kind of talked about it, like, um, what got you into horror, but what are some of your horror favorites now that you're grown?
So I am a huge fan of Jonathan Edward Durham's Winterset Hollow. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No, I
It's,
haven't.
it's relatively recent. It came out in, I want to say, late 2020, but I read
Okay.
it last year. Um, it's the craziest, most like unique plot. The writing I thought was like beautiful. It's like it was just a fantastic book. It instantly became one of my favorites. And then what Ring Shout I absolutely loved. I read that last year. That was a favorite as well. Have you read that?
No, I'm a little behind.
Yeah. Well, there's like a whole mountain of horror novels coming out every year, so it's impossible to read them all.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been like, my to be read pile is like this and growing every day.
and then Tome, um, that was like fantastic too.
Cool.
That was by Ross Jeffrey.
So which horror genre do you find yourself drawn to? Are you more like paranormal, psychological thriller, slasher? What's your preferred either reading or movie?
So I definitely love like paranormal, but I like something that is unique. But I don't just stick to paranormal either. Like I really like psychological horror as well, and even stuff that like sort of straddles the boundary of like genres, which
Mhm.
I think that book Winterset Hollow that I mentioned, some might categorize that as like dark fantasy.
Okay.
I would categorize it as like somewhere in between. But so I'm just looking for like sort of a unique and new experience. I'll read things like I read Aaron Beauregard's The Slob, which is pretty intense for a lot of readers, but I thought it was pretty good. And
Right on.
really enjoy the story, but it's pretty intense subject matter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Shawn, we're getting close to the end of our hour. And so what I'd like you to do, why don't you tell people watching where can they find you on social media? And then where can they find your books?
No. I've got a cookie cutter question that I want to ask both of you first.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to start with Shawn, but Daniela, I got the same question for you. If you could choose, again, it's a cookie cutter question, but I'm kind of curious. If you could choose anybody to voice an audiobook for you, who would it be?
Oh, geez. And you're starting with me?
I'm starting with you.
Jeez, I do not have an answer for that
Wow.
one. Yeah.
Okay, I thought
It
it was going to be
definitely
something.
wouldn't be me. How about that?
I was thinking it was going to be
listening to
something
my
cool
own
like
book.
Candyman himself or something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
all right, Daniela.
Yeah, I've actually been like shopping around to try and find someone to create audiobooks for the Darkland, and I'm actually kind of stumped. So
Well,
it's
damn, I thought
hard.
this was a cookie cutter question
No,
that all you
it's
guys
not.
that are writers would like know like
So,
that.
Obviously I read a ton of books, but I do not like listen to. I appreciate the medium. I just don't have a place to like listen to audiobooks. I guess I do. I could do it instead of reading, but I enjoy reading.
Yeah, I'm gonna start getting more audiobooks on my phone since I drive so much for work now. Since I drive the Dalton a lot, going back and forth between pump stations, because it's like 4 hours between pump station 1 and pump station 4, and but but in terms of finding someone to actually like, because you gotta make sure like the voice actually matches like the tone of your book, and
Right.
because that can really turn people off to your book.
Very true. And Ray actually said, instead of taking Joe camping with ghosts, let's visit haunted jails. Okay. Fair enough. I apologize.
Did Ray tell you his plan for us to like all get together and go to the Clown Motel in Tonopah?
That place looks awesome, by the way.
Oh, you've been there?
Is that where the movie was shot?
That's incredible.
It's in Tonopah, Nevada. They have the Clown Motel, and Ray and I have this idea that for the Indie Escape, we should all get together there and have our own like indie horror con.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So the Clown Motel, it's like every room is clown themed, and the hotel has like 3,000 clowns in the hotel, and next to the hotel, when you read the reviews for the site, they said it's as if Stephen King, John Carpenter, and Quentin Tarantino got together and designed their own ideal horror motel, because it's next door to a graveyard filled with plague victims from the 1800s.
Cheers.
And so ironically, you have to book in advance because it fills up.
And there's quite a few movies on that, and I think Zach Baggins actually went out there once, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken, but anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, come on. So Shawn, tell people listening where you are in social media, like how to find you and how and where to buy your books.
So the best place to find me is probably through my author website, which is ShawnBurgessAuthor.com. That'll take you to all my social media, but I'm pretty active on Twitter, fairly active on Facebook and Instagram. I have a TikTok account, don't use it much, but I guess I'll try to be better about that. So you can find any links to those places right through my website, again, which is ShawnBurgessAuthor.com. You can get my books at Amazon, through Barnes & Noble, get I think the first book through Walmart and a few other places online.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for appearing on Alaska Divided by Zero, part of the Indie Escape Network. We're, like I said, we are a collective of indie creatives that we try to promote indie authors, filmmakers, and artists.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Daniela. It was a true pleasure.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you. It's been a lot of fun. For those of you watching, Shawn and I, we just started interacting on Twitter. That's how we found each other's books, and I've become a big fan of Shawn's work. as you can tell by the questions I've been asking him.
Very, very, very cool. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and I hope to deal with you in the future.
Likewise, Joe. It was really nice to meet you.
All right. Take care. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
That was an amazing guest. And I am lagging. What the hell is going on here?
Yeah, there's it's like a slight delay, just kind of, just a little bit.
That doesn't happen to me. Damn it. See, now
I heard what you say, Joe.
So now that we're on the topic of where we can find people on social media and their books, go for it, please.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. If you like this content, please subscribe to the Indie Escape Network YouTube channel, or our Twitter page, or our Facebook page. You can find us. If you look below, it's just scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Thanks very much for watching, and have a great night.
No. You got to advertise your books too.
My books too? Oh, well, in that case, you can find my books. dmshepherd.com is my website. You can find me you can find my books on Amazon, The Darkland and The Devil's Valley, RI2 Alaska Backcountry Horror Stories. I have a few other books that I'm working on that will hopefully be coming out within the next year. And you can find me on Facebook, DM Shepherd. I'm also on Twitter, DM Shepherd 13, DM Shepherd 13 on Instagram, TikTok, and that's where I am.
All right. And I don't know if Ray is in earshot. Where can we find his stuff?
Raymond.
The guy who said that Joe is so far ahead, he comes in behind.
So Ray,
does he have a sculpting site or anything? Or?
He's still building his website. I don't think he's actually made it live yet. He has his own Facebook page, Ray Shepherd. Other than that, he's not on Twitter or Instagram. So a lot of times people find him through me. I'm a lot more active on the other social, because I've been building my author stuff. So I'm a lot more active on Twitter, and, it's kind of funny watching the dumpster fire that is happening on Twitter right now. I joke. I just sit back and eat popcorn and watch it go berserk.
I agree 100%. All right, ladies and gentlemen, another episode, a long-awaited episode of Alaska Divided by Zero and Cold Fusion. Oh, go.
I should mention, so last week we had to cancel my other guest, who is David Allen Voiles. Hopefully I will have him when I come back off shift in December with his Tales from the Hearse. So come join us in December, and we will hear all about David and his, he used to run a ghost tour operation out of a 72 Cadillac hearse.
Wow.
So
that cancellation was, Hurricane Nicole's fault. So we'll just.
Yep, but David has graciously, said, "Yeah, I'll come on some other time." So hopefully, when I come back in December, we will get to hear all about David and his. He's got some very fascinating horror stories. So.
Very cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us again this evening for Alaska Divided by Zero and Cold Fusion. Awesome guest, Shawn Burgess. And please like and subscribe to the Indie Escape Network on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and what's the other one that the funny kids do?
TikTok.
Yeah, that shows you how much I know. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you then. Now my music's not going to work. Daniela, you're just breaking everything. I don't know if I can work with you anymore.